All right, everybody. We're joined today by the former head coach of Tiger Muay Thai and former mixed martial arts competitor, George Hickman. How are you, man?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for, giving me the time to talk to you. It means a lot.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, I'd like to start off with just a little bit of a background on you. Obviously, I know some of your career and some of your journey into becoming the coach or the head coach at Tiger Muay Thai, but talk to us a little bit about your journey into becoming a coach and, you becoming the head coach and just everything like that.
Yeah. So I wrestled my whole life, as did my brother, and when I was finished in wrestling in college, after my senior year, after the national tournament, I kind of knew that I wanted to start fighting. So I started training in MMA kind of immediately, and I moved home back to North Carolina from college, and I had 2 amateur fights in North Carolina, and Wilmington, where I'm from, and then I kind of felt like I was, I not had outgrown it, but I needed to, I needed better coaching and training partners. So I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I trained for about 4 or 5 years. And I had a very good Muay Thai coach there, Manu Into, who, he fought in Thailand in the 90s, like during the golden era. And he was the first one that kind of introduced me to Thailand, just taking me to eat Thai food and stuff. And then, I had a lot of great training partners and coaches in Atlanta outside of him as well. And then I got the opportunity to come to the 2014 tryouts at Tiger Muay Thai. And so I came, I did that, I made the team and won a spot on the team. And it wasn't long after that, in 2014, that Brian Ebersole had left Tiger Muay Thai, and Roger Huerta was the head coach. And I kind of became the assistant coach. I was teaching wrestling, and I was the wrestling coach and the assistant MMA coach. And I still was fighting actively. And then probably, I don't remember exactly because it's been so long, but probably about a year and a half or 2 after I had been in Thailand, Roger had moved on from Tiger Muay Thai, and I became the head MMA coach. And then probably in 2017 or 16 or 17, my brother moved out and became the wrestling coach and the assistant MMA coach. And that's kind of like how, I got out from the tryouts, and then, just by people moving on, I became the MMA coach, and until as of, May this year, which I've now since moved on myself. So,
right.
Yeah, it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah. Were you kind of surprised, only being at Tiger Muay Thai for, like you said, a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and them having you become one of the head coaches from being an assistant coach? Were you kind of surprised that it moved so fast, or were you expecting it at some point?
I don't think, I never moved to Thailand with the aspirations or the thought of even coaching. But once I got to Tiger, I realized that, they didn't really have a wrestling coach. And Roger and myself I had a very good relationship with him from the beginning. And, I'm still to this day very thankful for him. He kind of put me into the position, which led to where I was, up until recently, since I've left Tiger. But it, I guess I didn't expect it, but I also, once he moved on, I kind of, I knew that I would be the next coach. But yeah, it's just funny, everything just kind of fell into place for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, now that you've moved on, it kind of just completely went full circle from when you started to where you're at now.
Yeah.
Well, there's obviously videos of the tryouts all over. You can watch tryouts and everything like that on the Tiger Muay Thai channel, but I don't think those videos really do it justice. would you say that those tryouts are some of the most difficult things that a professional fighter can go through?
Yeah, I mean, the tryouts, when I was a part of them, you only have really 3 days of trying out. So it's kind of a lot of stuff to cram into 3 days, to get, people from all over the world to come to one place and then, assess their skill level, assess what type of person they are and, what type of intestinal fortitude that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a lot of time to really to get to know someone. And MMA, and it's kind of similar to wrestling. It's a very intimate sport,
Yeah.
and the amount of time that you have to put in and the time that you spend with, your teammates and your coaches and things. So, we try to, we always made it hard. It was hard when I did it. And, we tried to make it hard when I was, a part of the coaching staff for it as well. But I would say that, no, it's not the hardest thing that you would do. It's definitely hard and grueling.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is because of the climate change. That people aren't used to the climate that's here in Thailand, and it's a 3-day push, so it's it is very hard. And I think that what you're probably referring to, and what most people know those tryouts for, are from the Muay Thai sessions with the Thai trainers, where they pretty much thump all the contestants that are trying out.
Yeah.
And that's like something that when I was actually the coach, the MMA coach, like when it came to that day, I would always just ask them, please don't hurt the fighters. But that's like, this is their country, their culture, their national sport. So it's not something that as a Westerner, you kind of want to get involved with too much. You just kind of, for that session, you just let them do their thing.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about it with people coming from all over the world to come to these tryouts because it is one of the best Muay Thai gyms in the world. What is the hardest thing for people from all over the world when they get there to Tiger for the first time, they get to Thailand for the first time? What's the hardest thing for them to adjust to in terms of whether it's the training or the climate? What is the hardest thing for the fighters to adjust to when they get to Thailand?
I'd probably just say the climate and the cultural changes.
Yeah, because it's super hot out in Thailand all the time, right? Isn't it normally like super hot out there and rainy, or no?
Yeah, it's very hot all year round, and right now we're in what we would call like rainy season. So it goes like in high season, which is like where most of the tourists come to Thailand, and it is always sunny pretty much every day. And that's from about like December, January until April, May.
Okay.
And then like right now we're in rainy season, but to be fair, like, sometimes like this year it hasn't rained. It'll rain sometimes, and then sometimes it won't rain for a couple of days, or, it'll rain in the morning and then be clear the rest of the day, or vice versa. So, but I would say that, any fighter that comes to train in Thailand is, it's just a cultural change is the biggest thing, and the climate.
Oh, okay. You can still hear me, right? Sorry, I had to decline a call.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about just some of the fighters who've trained at Tiger Muay Thai that have had a lot of success in the UFC recently. I mean, you look at some of the up-and-coming contenders like Rafael, Faziv, Brad Riddell, and you've got a guy in the PFL who trains at Tiger all the time, and Brendan Loughnane. What is it like having worked with those guys at some point and seeing where they're currently at in their careers?
It's great. The one thing about when I was coaching there is I always had there were always great athletes, and another thing is gyms in Thailand. A lot of people come and train at Tiger, but it doesn't mean that I was their coach or that I would corner them. But there were also a lot of people that I did work with very closely.
Okay.
But someone like Brad Riddell, he was a very skilled kickboxer and Muay Thai fighter. And I helped him with wrestling and things like that, but he has since moved on and went back to New Zealand with a few of his other teammates like Kaikar, France, and things, which I've coached. But
Okay.
it's when I was coaching there were always high profile athletes coming through, and yeah, I got to play a part in, you know, some of their journeys, and other ones, like, you know, I didn't really work with too much. Again, because the thing about being in Thailand is it's always, yeah, people come here. Some come for training camp, some come just to train, some come on holiday and they're training, but you're not really their coach. Everyone has a gym back home, and everyone has a coach back home. So
right.
There were some fighters, you know, that I did, like Khalil Roundtree. I was his coach, and
Right.
you know, I cornered him for his fights while he was living in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Right. And Khalil is coming back. Isn't he having another fight in the UFC at some point? I feel like
I believe. Yeah. He's, I think, fighting in the next couple of months, but he's you know, with COVID, it's a crazy situation. So after his last fight in January on Fight Island, I was there with him for that. And then he's gone back to the States, and he's been spending time there with his family and whatnot. And he will do his, you know, his camp for his next fight. He will do it in the States. But actually, my brother's there in Vegas right now.
okay.
Because, you know, my brother left as well from Tiger, and we're opening a gym here in Phuket, Thailand. So my brother's there right now until things get set up, and then he'll be back out. But he's working with, like, Brendan's there right now. My brother's working with Brendan, and he's coaching at Syndicate MMA right now. So he's been helping Khalil as well, and yeah.
Right. And I mean, I know we probably can't talk a lot about whatever you're working on with the gym, but what can you tell us about this new gym that you're opening up in Phuket?
It's yeah, I'm super excited. You know, and when I left Tiger, it was on good terms, and I'm very thankful for the, you know, what I've been able to achieve there, and I'm thankful for the opportunities that I was given as a young coach to be able to coach at such a world-renowned gym. You know, I learned a lot, and obviously I'm still learning all the time, but it was just time kind of for me to move on, and a few others. And yeah, we have a gym that we're making here in Phuket, and there will be a lot more in the very near future that will come out about it. But what I will say is that myself and the team, we're very excited about what we have coming, and I can't wait to, you know, in short amount of time, be able to release more stuff about where it's at and what it's going to look like and things like that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that as well. I think anytime there's a new gym, especially with a head coach or a coach like yourself, it's always a good opportunity for the fighters to get a new look. Let's talk a little.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked about how you worked with Kai Kara France, and you've worked with some of the guys at City Kickboxing out in Thailand. What is your relationship from a coaching standpoint with the people who train at City Kickboxing, whether it's Dan Hooker, Alexander Volkanovski, Brad Riddell, Kai Kara France? Just talk to us a little bit about your coaching relationship with the guys at City Kickboxing.
Yeah, so most of those guys were my training partner. Like Alex Volkanovski did the Tryouts with me in 2014.
Okay.
And he won a spot as well from the Tryouts. So him, myself, Brad Riddell was there. Brad was he was a fighter at the time, but he eventually became the kickboxing coach. So I worked with him very closely.
Okay.
And I helped Brad with wrestling and stuff. My brother, on the other hand, has a lot more. You know, when I was coaching at Tiger, I was the head coach, so it was kind of hard for me to get away for long periods of time, other than to corner fighters and fights and things. So my brother would go out for a month or a little bit longer than that. It all kind of started with Israel Adesanya. So my brother would go out as kind of like an assistant coach to Andre, his wrestling coach, in New Zealand, but more of a training partner. Mm-hmm. But he also, that's still going on today. You know, he cornered Israel when he fought Jan.
Right.
He was out there as a training partner in his most recent fight. But he usually helps Israel and Brad, and he coaches Volkanovski for all of his fights.
Mm-hmm.
so he's more of, I would say, in a coaching role than myself. I'm very close with all of those guys. I used to coach Kai, like after Kai was on The Ultimate Fighter, I went with him when he fought in Japan for Ryzen. But shortly after that, he moved back home. So all those guys kind of like when I started coaching, they had all kind of moved back to New Zealand anyways.
Okay.
And Dan was, while I was the head coach, Dan was at Tiger as well for a brief amount of time. I cornered him recently just because he had asked me. None of his coaches could go to Fight Island when he had fought Michael Chandler. So I was there with Khalil. So him and Eugene Behrman, his coach, had asked me if I could, help him out while I was there. And, of course, he's, that gym is like kind of like family to us, to myself and my brother and, our other coaches that will be with us at the new gym. We've always had a very close relationship with them and, exchange techniques and knowledge. And again, my brother is always with them for fights and things. So it's a very close relationship. But as far as me, if they ever need anything of me for coaching, I'm always here for them or available. And I feel like it's, reciprocated as well on their side. So we have a very, very close relationship with that gym.
Right. And I mean, that gym, the success for that gym kind of speaks for itself. I mean, Israel obviously came up short in his last fight, he won his last fight, but came up short in his move up to 205. But I'm pretty sure he'll be back at the light heavyweight division at some point. But I mean, Dan Hooker's probably looking to come back soon. I mean, Volkanovski's got the fight with Ortega coming up. So, I mean, that gym's been really making strides in the last year and a half, 2 years. What do you think of, so would you say that out of everybody at that gym, you're probably the closest in terms of a training/coaching relationship with Brad Riddell and Volkanovski, just because you worked with them at the tryouts?
Yeah. So like with Brad, I've helped Brad with wrestling and grappling and stuff. And I've also learned a lot from Brad as well. Brad is, he's a fighter and he's in the UFC. But he's had over 70 kickboxing and Muay Thai fights. He's like Israel, he's one of the best strikers in MMA. And the knowledge that he possesses for striking is, it's incredible. And I've learned heaps from him. I would say that probably out of all of those guys, Volkanovski and Brad Riddell are probably the two that I'm closest with.
Right. And did you ever get the chance to work with Rafael Faziv or no?
Yeah, for his last fight in December, I was there for that fight. I cornered him in December when he fought, and I've cornered him for I think 3 of his UFC fights.
Okay, yeah, he was a former coach at Tiger as well, right? Didn't he coach or no?
Yeah, he's the kickboxing coach. He's he's a guy that I don't really, I don't work with him anymore. He's in America and stuff, but he's a very, very, very skilled MMA fighter, but more so a very skilled striker. He's another guy with a wealth of knowledge. Yeah,
and I'm excited. He's got a fight with Bobby Green coming up, so I'm excited to see him get to work again.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
Well, I'm sure this is kind of a hard question, but who do you think is the most natural fighter that you've ever had the chance to coach? Somebody who just kind of picked up on everything, quickly, didn't really take super long to figure anything out, and it was just kind of natural to them.
Not one person kind of stands out in my mind.
Okay.
But, I've had the pleasure, again, of working with a lot of fighters. The one Thai girl that I trained that's in the UFC, Loma, Lookboonmee, she, I would say, because I've been with her since the beginning of her MMA career, she's probably one person that, because I have been with her, from the beginning of her MMA career, so I've seen the progress that she's made. But just coming from, like a Muay Thai background and, being that she fought her whole life in Muay Thai at a very high level, to be able to, after 3 fights, get into the UFC, 3 or 4 fights, I can't remember, yeah, that was, she's a person that has, picked up the ground and wrestling offense and defense up pretty quickly. Because, sometimes people that don't know the sport very well or don't understand it, just because you're a good striker in, kickboxing or Muay Thai or boxing, and then you transition to MMA, the striking is very different. Mm-hmm. It's completely different. If you look at someone like Gokhan Saki, who, before Khalil ever moved to Thailand, he fought Gokhan Saki and knocked him out. Nobody, I would guarantee, would ever think that he would knock Gokhan Saki out, but he did. So the sport is very different, and it's the same thing, as a wrestler coming in, taking people down, you have to learn jiu-jitsu. Everything, the grappling changes. Just the whole sport, it's very different. The cage wrestling is very different in MMA than it is from normal wrestling, and as is jiu-jitsu and striking. So it's, I would say that, just, being with someone from the start of their career in MMA, I would say that she's picked up, the different aspects of MMA quite quickly.
Right. And does Loma have a fight coming up again or no?
She does not have anything at the current time, but here very soon she will, I believe.
Right. Is she ranked in her weight class in the UFC or not yet?
She is not.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to see her get her next fight going. Something you kind of touched on is striking for Muay Thai and striking for MMA. It's different because there's different ranges. You have the wrestling you have to worry about and, everything like that. But would you say it's harder for a Thai striker to learn how to strike in MMA, or is it harder for them to learn how to pick up on the wrestling for MMA?
The thing I don't know. I think it'd probably be maybe harder to pick up on wrestling, but also, clinching in Muay Thai is like what you see in America and other Western countries is not really, it's real Muay Thai, but it's not scored the same way as it is in Thailand, and they fight differently here. But I think that, Muay Thai fighters that have a strong background in clinching, for Muay Thai clinching, can pick up wrestling quite quickly once they realize, the difference, and being able to attack the legs in wrestling, whereas in Muay Thai you can't really do that because it's a foul. Yeah. But I would say that maybe it's a bit harder to pick up the wrestling, but in my experience with the Thai athletes that I do train, they've naturally kind of progressed into MMA quite well, and sometimes they don't understand the things that they're doing, but they're doing it right because it's just a natural feel that they've had from fighting at a high level their whole lives.
Right. Something I'd like to ask you, and I'm sure you'd be the best person to ask, is technique in whether it's Muay Thai, MMA. It's always important to have crisp technique. But would you say that in Thailand, it's kind of more prevalent, like from a technical standpoint? Are the fighters in Thailand better from a technical standpoint?
You mean in actual Muay Thai?
Yeah. So like in Muay Thai, and if like a Thai fighter were to go to mixed martial arts, like the training out in Thailand, is it more like, I wouldn't say strict, but is it more like heavy on the technical aspects than training out here in America?
Well, you have to remember that MMA is, it's made up of many different, boxing and Muay Thai, right, and jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and karate. There's so many more aspects, it's, to me, watching MMA is like, it's just like chaos. You never know, like, you're going to break your leg if you throw a kick, or your foot's going to get stuck in the cage, or, anything can happen. Whereas in Muay Thai or boxing, it's, you're only training one thing all the time. And that's for Muay Thai. For here, for instance, a fighter wakes up in the morning and, they run, and then they hit pads, and then maybe in the afternoon they run again, and then they hit pads, and then they, spar and clinch, or, vice versa in the morning. So it's only one thing that they, outside of like, running and some conditioning stuff that they're doing. But it's just very different. It's there's a lot of technique, and there's it's very, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain like about Thailand to someone that, have you ever been to Thailand?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, you should come out sometime. But yeah, it's very Muay Thai here is very different than it is in the West. But yes, there's a lot of emphasis on technique. But in Muay Thai also, not everyone has good technique. Some fighters are pressure fighters, and they go forward the whole time and take a lot of damage. And some fighters are, clinch fighters, so they throw some punches and kicks just to get to the clinch, where they're best at, for knees and elbows and sweeps and things. And then there's other fighters that back up the whole time, or not the whole time, but they are very high IQ fighters. They kick, and then they block a kick, and then they punch and get out of the way. So different fighters train different ways and different techniques here. Whereas I think kind of in the West, a lot of fighters, or maybe some are better at some things than others. But, it's just as far as Muay Thai is concerned, it's a very different, the way it's scored, the effect that the gambling has here on it is just very, very different from in the West.
Awesome. Yeah. I would love to get a chance to come out to Thailand at some point. It's always been something I've wanted to do, just to, like you said, like see the difference between the MMA and kickboxing training out here compared to, where Muay Thai really kind of originated from in Thailand.
Yeah. Again, as an MMA fighter, and in most places, you hit pads with, a lot of times you hit pads with your boxing or your Muay Thai coach or your MMA coach, and then you grapple with this person and then wrestle with that person. Whereas in Muay Thai, or even, for instance, in the UFC, like a lot of guys will take women will take, they got their striking coach, they got their jiu-jitsu or wrestling coach, their MMA coach, they have, different people for different things. Where in Muay Thai, you have your trainer that is the one that primarily trains you at whatever gym you're at. And, maybe one or two other people. And then as the Thais like to say, the big boss, or the owner of the gym, who in between rounds is the one, the guy who actually trains them is probably, like, at least in the big stadiums in Bangkok, a lot of times, the trainer will tell them things as well in between rounds, but, he's giving them ice and water, and the fighters listening or looking to the owner of the gym, who a lot of times, was never a fighter, but understands the sport very much. And as, and how because, fights, while a Muay Thai fight is going on, the odds change during the fight. And you'll see the fighters looking at their corner, looking at the gamblers. Like, it's just a very, very different, very different sport.
Okay. All right. So what we were talking about before that, you brought up something that I think is kind of interesting, because you said that with the gambling and the betting, and you mentioned something about the fighters can look at the odds and see the odds change in between rounds in their Thai fights. Is that correct?
Well, not really look at the odds, but they're definitely, like, the corner will know what the odds are.
Okay.
Will tell them to do specific things, and gambling just plays a huge role in Muay Thai and the way that it's scored here in Thailand.
I mean, so basically there's always a bunch of people in the stadiums trying to bet on the fights.
Yes. It's very, very gambling heavy.
That kind of brings me back to something that I think a lot of fans and fighters have wanted for MMA, the UFC especially, is open scoring. Like, being able to know if you're winning a round, let's say it's going into the third round, and they'll know, if it's tied 1 apiece or if a fighter's down 2-0. Do you think that open scoring is something that we need in mixed martial arts?
I don't know. I think a lot of people would, say yes, and people would say no as well. Me personally, Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that there definitely needs to be some type of updated criteria on scoring MMA. I don't, maybe open scoring would, is the answer. I don't know that. But it definitely would, could have a different effect on the fight. That is for sure. But there definitely, again, needs to be, to answer your question, I'm not really sure. Okay. I would have to think about it and research it a bit, but there definitely needs to be some type of updated criteria for scoring MMA fights because, some fights, all the judges will get it right, watching like the UFC, for example, and then other fights, you're just like, how in the hell, did that person win or lose? Like, sometimes it's very ridiculous, the outcomes. But, again, like judging MMA is, I think, very subjective to, what people put more emphasis on, that scoring it, some things, one guy will score higher than somebody else. So that maybe there needs to be more consistency.
Right. Do you feel that all judges should have to have at least some form of experience in training, and whether they're judging boxing, they have to have experience in training, or if they're judging, Muay Thai fights, they have to be experienced in the training, or MMA, or vice versa? Do you think that part of the problem with the judging is that some of these judges who, call these fights don't have experience in training or even watch the sport that much unless they're judging the fight?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that'll ever happen, but I definitely think that it could help. That's for sure.
All right. And did you get the chance to see the fight this past weekend with Dillashaw and Sandhagen?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
But if you're going to ask me what I thought won, that is on my list to do, is to watch it back this week. Because, I'm a fan as well of fighting. Before I'm a coach, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
And, you're watching the fight, you're listening to the commentators, you're reading the tweets popping up on the TV.
Yeah.
You're having conversations with who's around you. So I would say that I need to watch it again to make an educated to decide who I thought won. Because I thought it was very close.
Mm-hmm.
But I would definitely need to watch it again. But I mean, maybe if you're going off damage, you could say that Sandhagen won.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm not mad at the decision either way, because like you said, I mean, that fight was pretty much razor thin. Like, every round was super close except for when Sandhagen scored that knockdown, obviously. But it was so back and forth. It's probably one of the highest level fights we've ever seen in the UFC.
Yes, I would say off my natural, like my first just watching it again, as I said, watching it like I did, I would probably say Sandhagen won, but I definitely need to go back and watch it again.
Yeah. What did you think about the Miranda Maverick and Macy Barber fight? Did you get a chance to see that one?
That one I did not watch yet.
Okay, because apparently everybody scored the fight for Maverick. Like, even the media members, every single person had it 29-28, but Macy got the split decision. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I did see that on Twitter. Yeah, that's another one. I'll probably go back and watch the whole event again. 1 second, my daughter is going crazy.
You're okay, no problem.
Come on. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Well, let's talk about another guy that I believe you've had a lot of experience with, at least training. I could be wrong again because you don't work with everybody. Petr Yan, the former UFC bantamweight champion, looks like he's going to be fighting Aljamain Sterling in the rematch at the end of October. But what do you think of Yan as an overall fighter and just his success coming into the UFC and just basically dominating from, start to finish?
It does not surprise me at all. I said I've known Petr since he was probably had one professional fight when he first came to Tiger. And he's, a lot of fighters are not Petr is one of the rare guys that is, he can box, he can clinch Muay Thai style, he can elbow, he can kick, he can take people down, as we saw in his fight against Aljo.
Yeah.
He can jiu-jitsu, he can do it all. And I think, I don't personally corner Petr. I've cornered him one time when he fought in Chicago.
Okay, I was actually at that fight.
Oh yeah, I was in America with Loma when she fought one of her fights in Invicta. I think her last fight actually, and then I flew over to corner him.
Okay.
But he works very closely with John Boy, the boxing coach at Tiger, who is I would say his head coach, and does a phenomenal job with not only Petr but all of the fighters. But I used to joke with Petr and say when he was in ACB, he's going to be ACB champion. And then after it was that, I used to joke with him and say, oh, you're going to go to the UFC. And then I would joke with him and say that, you're going to be the UFC champion. And after he won, when he beat Aldo, I messaged him that. And I said, now you're the UFC champion. It's just kind of funny because, even before fighting Sterling, I think a lot of people counted him out. And, to me, which is like a lot of the guys, not only Petr, but Volkanovski as well.
Yep.
We've all known how good they all are for many, many years. And, when Petr fought Sterling, obviously the result was obviously shit.
Yeah,
But it did not surprise me to see him do what he was doing to Sterling, taking him down and just kind of big brothering him around the cage. Because I've known that for years. We've all known how much skill that he's had.
Would you say that he's one of, if not the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC?
Yeah, that's, I think, kind of what I was getting at before.
Yeah.
He is definitely one of the most skilled fighters in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting what you said, because every prediction I saw for that Sterling fight, barely anybody was picking Jan, and I'm sitting there like, he's going to kill this guy. Like, I'm like, Jan's going to run right through Aljo. Obviously, the result, what happened, but I'm sure that'll all be made right in this rematch if it goes according to plan. But, a lot of people picked against him. And then, like you said, with Volkanovski, I don't think a lot of people were expecting him to beat Holloway. And, the second fight was close. But the first fight, it was basically a wash, like a whitewash, 5 rounds to none.
Well, you sound like a knowledgeable person then. Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's Volkanovski is one of the most, again, he can strike, he can wrestle, he can do jiu-jitsu and grappling, he can do it all. And I would say that him and Petr are two of the most well-rounded, fighters out of any, out of the whole roster in the UFC.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. I see a lot of people picking Ortega against Volkanovski as well. And I obviously, fights are different. If you fight a different guy, you might have success with a guy, and then the guy that you beat, if he beats somebody and you fight them and you have problems with them, it's just different. But I don't expect Volkanovski to lose that title for a long time.
Yeah, I don't either. And I'm not saying that just because, I'm good friends with him and,
right.
We're teammates with him and things like that. He's Alex is a very, very, very skilled fighter, and he's the same as Petr Yan. They're both always improving at their craft. They're constantly in the gym, constantly upskilling, and both of them are like really true professionals. I've seen some very professional UFC athletes. I've seen some athletes that are not the most professional in the UFC as far as their training and nutrition and things. But, fighting at that level, it's the highest level. It's the pinnacle of the sport, what every young fighter wants, aspires to be a UFC fighter. And everybody at that level that's fighting in the UFC, they're good. And it's the small things that set people apart, whether it's, rehab or this or that. It's everyone's punching, everyone's kicking, and everyone's grappling. So it's you have to do the extra things that are going to set you apart, whether it's a mental coach or breath work or any edge that you can get over competition. You have to try to do.
Yeah,
and both of those guys are consistently consistently performing, consistently winning, and doing it at the highest level.
Right. Yeah, I don't see anyone at 45 really giving Volkanovski trouble right now. And at 35, man, I don't know. I don't want to jinx anything, but like, I don't see anybody in that division that can really give Petr, like, I'm not going to say not give him a challenge because they're all professional fighters. They're all, at the highest level, but I kind of just feel like he's at a different level than everybody in that weight class.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And another thing about Petr, and you can say that for Volk as well, because he did it in the second fight against Holloway, is they can make adjustments on the fly in the round, after the round, going back to the corner and come out the next round. They can make adjustments during the fight that may be a small adjustment, but in the big picture is a very big adjustment. And not all fighters can do that, and both of them can do that.
Yeah, and they're two of my favorite fighters as well, so I'm excited to see. Obviously, that Sterling and Jan fight, I've been waiting for that fight to get rebooked since the minute that fight got called off, so I'm excited, and it's coming up very soon.
You and me both.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting question for you because you've had experience in Muay Thai and mixed martial arts. One Championship runs Thai boxing, Muay Thai fights with the 4-ounce gloves on. What are your thoughts on having some of the highest level, Thai fighters like Nikki Holskin, like, Jonathan Haggerty, I think fights in one as well. What are Liam Harrison, what are your thoughts on Thai style fights with the 4-ounce gloves on?
I'm a big fan of the Muay Thai and kickboxing and one championship. It's very, very, very different than what you would watch at, say, Rajagumnarn Stadium in Bangkok. Mm-hmm. It's the way that it's, first of all, a lot of times it's in a cage. And to me, the Muay Thai and one championship is, again, I'm a huge fan. And some of the fighters that are, I'm super stoked for the fight that they have this coming Friday. Some of the Thai fighters that they have in that are phenomenal fighters. And it's incredible to see them make the money that they make in one where they would not probably make that money in Thailand. But I think that it's a different style of Muay Thai. It's obviously with 4-ounce gloves and in a ring is very different than in a cage is very different than in a ring.
Uh-huh.
And the clinching is different, and it's very different scoring system than it would be in Thailand. But I'm a huge fan of it, and watching some of those guys throw down with 4-ounce gloves is great to watch. And even the kickboxing, I'm more of a fan of Muay Thai than I am of kickboxing.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the highest of levels of fighters in not only kickboxing but Muay Thai as well. So if you get a chance, you should definitely watch the upcoming event that they have this coming week. Because some of those fighters are, they're incredible.
That's one championship has an event this week?
Yeah, it is this, I believe, coming Friday.
Okay.
It'll be Friday evening Thai time for us, so
morning,
probably Friday morning for you.
Yeah. Huh. I'll definitely have to look it up. We actually get, I don't know if it's everywhere, but we get one over here on cable so we can watch it. Just some of the events, not everything, but.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually, that you guys can now watch it. Because, like, here, I just watch it either on an app or on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm glad that they got the deal done for, like, the TV. I think it was, like, a year or two ago, but I'm happy that everybody gets to see that because, like you said, I mean, it's the highest level, some of the highest level fighters in the world. And, I mean, they, like you said, they just throw down. And it's technical, but it's, like, it's crazy to see some of that.
Yeah, it's as far as like watching, fights abroad, and it's very different than it was 10 years ago. I mean, now with the internet and social media, you can watch, you could watch events live from, all the stadiums in Thailand all the time. So, no, it's definitely, one, having that deal in the States is, it gives you guys access in America to, to watch very high level fighters that you know normally probably wouldn't have access to be able to watch.
Right. Have you ever had the chance to work with Jonathan Haggerty? I think he's trained at Tiger. I'm not sure, but have you ever had the chance to work with him?
No, I've seen him at events before in the Philippines and things like that, but no, I don't think he's been to Tiger, at least while I was there, or that I remember.
Okay.
And no, I've never worked with him, but I follow him on social media, and I do enjoy watching him fight. He's a very, very skilled fighter.
Yeah. Okay. I was just checking because I was like maybe he's worked with him. I'm not sure. Who would you say is a fighter you like to watch as a fan the most? I'm sure you have a ton of fighters you like to watch, whether it's in kickboxing or MMA, but who is a guy that you like to watch all the time just as a fan?
That's quite a broad question. A lot of fighters, man. Like I obviously enjoy watching, the guys from City Kickboxing, all of them, because I'm personally invested in it. Because they're my friends and whatnot. But yeah, man, I'm a fan of a lot of fighters. When DC was fighting, still, I really enjoyed him. Most of the time, a lot of the times, I should say, I enjoy watching, wrestlers that I've known over the years or things like that. But I'm also, a fan of I guess you could say, whether it's MMA or Muay Thai and kickboxing, people that have high fight IQs. Obviously, I'm like everybody else. I enjoy watching, two guys go out there and just like a car crash, just going after it and pressuring forward. And I think we all love watching great fights like that. But I really appreciate the skill on someone like Israel, for example. Just the skill level that he possesses and the vision that he has and the things that he sees while he's out there and that he does is it's like art almost. It's beautiful to watch. And fighters that are like that in MMA or fighters like that in Muay Thai, I really enjoy watching that. Like I watched a lot of being in Thailand. My wife, her father he was involved in the Muay Thai business for decades. And so I watch a lot of Muay Thai, and I thoroughly enjoy watching, people who are very skilled, high-level IQ fighters fight.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of casual fans, will sit there and say, "Oh, this is boring. This is this," but technical fights are always the best to watch.
100%. At the same time, somebody like Khabib, I as a wrestler, what more could you want from somebody? But it's not like he, would just take people down and lay on them. He would take them down and hold them down against their will and, punish them. Yeah. And some of the techniques that, I've learned a lot from watching, his fights and the things that he did. He's just an incredible fighter.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to be honest, like early on in his career, I wasn't a fan of Khabib. I wasn't like super invested, but the more I got to like learn about him and just like learn what he's doing and why he's doing it and see him do what he did to, guys like Poirier and guys like Justin Gaethje. That Gaethje fight was pretty incredible. He basically walked them down, took everything that he had, and then was like, all right, I'm just going to take you down and choke you now.
Yeah, I think the longer that, he was fighting in the UFC and the more dominant he became.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit it out right on the head. Like he started off in some of his fights, like there was a couple that were kind of close, but then like later in his career, the Conor fight, he dominated, but I guess there was a couple rounds that were close, but the Poirier fight, besides the guillotine choke, he basically walked through him, and then Gaethje, he landed a few good shots on him, but he basically just walked right through him as well.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible when you have a fighter that, every single person that they fight, that they go up against knows what they're going to do.
Yep.
Like Khabib, he's going to take you down. He's going to get you to the fence and take you down and either finish you with ground and pound or a choke. And that's exactly, what he did to most people.
Yep. Yeah, it's incredible, and I hope we get to see him come back for at least one more. I'd like to see him in GSP at some point, but I highly doubt we're ever going to get that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I've had I've trained a lot of guys from that part of the world, from Dagestan and Chechnya.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I know about them is that I've learned from them as well is, like we say in the States, your word is your bond, and when those guys say something, they mean it. Mm-hmm. So I doubt that we'll ever see Khabib fight again.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Dana's going to try everything he can to get him to come back, but I mean, Khabib's one of the most disciplined guys in MMA, and I don't expect him to go back on his word.
Yeah, I don't either. And if he doesn't, of course, we'd all love to see him fight again, but it was good to enjoy watching what he did. And it seems like, he wants Islam to carry the torch now.
Yeah, and listen, I think Islam's a great fighter. I think he's fantastic. I mean, what he did to Moises and what he's been able to do to guys in the UFC so far, it's incredible. I don't think he's going to be able to get that title though. I don't know. I don't see him getting to the same success level as Khabib. And I could be wrong. I mean, he could prove me wrong every fight after this, but I don't know. I just don't know if I see him getting that belt at 55.
Yeah, it's obviously, one of the toughest weight classes. But I think he's still young, and he's,
mm-hmm.
Still getting experience, and he's had some long layoffs where he hasn't been able to get fights. I wouldn't be surprised, if eventually he got the title. But and I think that he's improved a lot. I think he showed his striking abilities in the last fight. But I think it's, something with him. Obviously, he's living in, he's in the spotlight now, but he's always going to be compared his whole career to Khabib, and that's a lot of pressure to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that he's young, man. I think he's still maturing in the sport, and I think that we've seen recently, Charles Oliveira, for example, winning the title and things. It's and even Dustin Poirier, to be where he's at now, there's some people that, go into the UFC and they get hot and they, do this and that, and then they're out of there. And then there's other guys that, it never pans out for them, or they're always going to be like a 500 fighter, or, always in the UFC, but never a contender. And then there's other guys, that, take their lumps, and they win a lot, they lose some, and like Charles Oliveira, and then you come back later in your career, or Dustin Poirier, and you have that experience and that confidence. It just takes a while. It's very different, like MMA, like some people get into the UFC with less than 10 fights. Imagine that. And then someone like Loma that I train has, she's in the UFC now, but she's had over 200 Muay Thai fights in her lifetime. Like or Israel, over 100 kickboxing and boxing fights, or Brad Riddell. Like, it's a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Compared to MMA, where, maybe you were just a jiu-jitsu person, or just a wrestler, or just a kickboxer. I think now we're starting to see, fighters that are MMA fighters, the new generation of guys that, they don't start with just one thing. They start training MMA.
Yeah.
But I think that experience plays a lot. So sometimes it takes a while for people to, to get their confidence, to get their skill level, to get comfortable in the cage. Because, I remember my first couple of MMA fights, I felt very confident. Looking back on it now, I was terrible. I thought in my head, I was good at, boxing or striking and stuff. And I wasn't. And, it took me a while to get comfortable in there. Whereas it just, having the experience of doing another sport, and wrestling helped me mentally be able to compete.
Mm-hmm.
But it just takes a while. Like, fighting is a whole different, it's different from wrestling, it's different from grappling. So having, experience, whether it's boxing or Muay Thai, and then coming to MMA, it definitely helps a lot. So I think a lot of fighters, it just takes time for them to mature and to get that confidence and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, And, it is kind of crazy. Like, you see people coming into the UFC a lot earlier now. I mean, 21, 22, 23 years old. And I think part of the reason for that, like you said, is, wherever they go to train now, they start off in MMA as a kid. Like, they'll start and as not a boxer, not a kickboxer, but they'll start as a mixed martial artist, and they're like 7 or 8 years old. And it's like, they get all this experience in every discipline. And then compared to guys who maybe were a boxer for 10 years and then did MMA for 3, I mean, it's just different.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very different. It's funny how, the sport is so, it's still so young, and it's constantly evolving and changing. And I think now we're getting to a point where it's guys training MMA when they start fighting, and not just, being a specialist in one thing and then transitioning over. Like, there's science behind it now. There's, the sport's always changing in every aspect, the techniques and the training methods and the, sleep. And it's becoming, it's definitely growing. That is for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm excited to see. I mean, MMA could look completely different in 5 years than what it does right now.
100%.
All right. So, something we were discussing was just how much the game of MMA can change from now until, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I mean, it might be in a year. We don't really know. MMA is kind of moving so fast. And, there's guys who come into the UFC for, a year, and then they're already towards the top of the contention or they're already ranked after like a year. They might be in the top 5. They might be in the top 10. But if you had to guess, do you think there's going to be any changes made to the sport of MMA in the next couple years or anything like that? Can you see anything really changing with, maybe the rules, maybe just the fights in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know right offhand what that would be, but yeah, the sport is always evolving. I think it's evolving for the better, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some rule changes, or I definitely think the science and training and the techniques they're constantly evolving. The athletes that are going into the UFC and other prominent promotions are, they're becoming better and better all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't think that the sport is ever going to stay stagnant. I think that it's going to, constantly change and evolve, as well as the people in it. So,
yeah,
there'll be another Conor McGregor, there'll be another Habib, and they'll be even better.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what happens next, because like you said, MMA is never stagnant. It's always moving. It's always changing. Let me ask you this, just from a coaching perspective, what would you say, and this is probably going to be a little bit hard to answer, but what would you say is one of the proudest moments you've had as a coach?
I'd say probably, yeah. Yeah. For me, a lot of the times, obviously, I train Loma, and seeing her get into the UFC and win her first fight was, that was awesome for me. And even her first fight, her first professional fight in Invicta, I think I even had a tear in that one. And not just because that she won, but where she came from.
Mm-hmm.
But for me personally, in my past, formerly when I was coaching at Tiger, I got to a corner, I got to train and work with a lot of UFC fighters and Bellator fighters and one championship fighters. But for me personally, I love the country that I live in, Thailand, and,
Mm-hmm.
My wife is Thai, and I have a half Thai daughter. But I just know that there's so much untapped, because the sport has changed, in the time that I've been here in almost 8 years, when I first got here, and not because of me, just, I mean, like, just in general, the public didn't know that much. Muay Thai is their national sport. They didn't know much about MMA.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand the skill that it took. And I think that the sport has evolved in this country as far as, one championship is, a big reason, a big factor in that. And obviously now with Loma being in the UFC, but now you see signs on buses and stuff in Bangkok that, promoting the UFC, you can watch it on the station or whatnot. And a lot of places show the fights. They, I used to watch it on Fight Pass, all the events, but now I just watch it on my local, I have an application for my phone service here, and it has also like Fox Sports and stuff, which they play the UFC on here.
Yeah.
But just the knowledge for MMA now, a lot of people know what MMA is, or if you say it in Thai, they know what it means. And for me, this is my home now, and I get more satisfaction out of seeing someone like Loma or someone like Top Noi, another Thai that I trained that was, formerly he was fought for the belt twice at Rajadamnern Stadium, and he was a high-level Muay Thai fighter.
Okay.
That transitioned to MMA, and he was fighting in Ryzen before COVID happened, and not even those two, other Thais that I've trained that have fought MMA and won. I get more satisfaction. I get a lot of satisfaction, I should say, out of seeing those people win, and for me and myself, and my brother and my Alex, who's one of my partners that will be in the gym. We love training the local community and Thais, and I want to see this country grow and produce more UFC fighters and other big promotion fighters. So I would just say, as a coach, my proudest moments are helping not the people under the bright lights in the UFC, but helping the younger fighters, the less the much less known fighters win and get to eventually get to that level. That's what I guess I enjoy most, and I'm most proud of.
Right. So you like to so to speak, you want to be building these guys up from the ground rather than getting them when they're already experienced and in the UFC. That's what makes you the proudest, is being able to build them up and see your work and their hard work pay off.
Yeah, definitely. Being with them from the beginning and watching them grow and fail and come back again and get to the pinnacle of the sport.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Any fighter that I train or I'm friends with, I'm going to help them. In any way that I can. And I'm going to be very happy, when they succeed. But just because, the place that I live at and, being in this country, I feel like it's almost a duty for me to share my knowledge, and any of, my brother or anybody else that I'm associated with, to share the knowledge with the local community and push them forward. And not even just, the local Thai community, but, I train other fighters that are from other countries that are, still very low level fighters as far as, what promotion they're in, fighting in, rinky dink. I remember fighting in the States, in bars and things like that, or, nightclubs and stuff. But I've been to some venues here that are, old Muay Thai stadiums, the back of a nightclub, some crazy experiences, cornering here or in China for that matter. But, I hope other fighters that are, haven't made it yet, so to speak, and just being able to be a part of their journey and help them in some way, and then see them, get to the big show, and, what they've strived for their whole career that's very, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
Right. I don't think you could have answered that question any better. I think that's awesome. Wanting to help guys or girls just build up from, maybe a relative, unknown to eventually becoming one of the best people in the sport. That's kind of all the questions I had for you for today. Did you have any questions for me?
No, just where, yeah, I mean, just let me know where I can share it and, you know, get people to listen to it.
100%. I enjoyed this interview. It's one of my favorite interviews that I've done. I hope you enjoyed it.
No, I did. I did. And, you know, you did a damn good job. I have to say, the way that you ask questions and you flow into the next question, it's very good, very professional.
Awesome, man. Thank you. That means a lot. People can get a hold of you on your Instagram at, I think it's GHick, HICK1.
Yep.
And then do you have a Twitter that they can get a hold of you at as well?
Yep, same thing on Twitter.
GHick1. Okay. Well, again, thank you for giving me the chance to interview you. I know it took a little bit of time. We had to figure out the time difference and everything, but I really enjoyed it. And thank you very much.
Yes, as did I, brother. As did I. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. I'll talk to you later, man.
Yep, sounds good.
All right. Bye.